We enter now the second segment of this mini-seminar on the Mahatma Letters. Some things to be considered are, of course, the nature, not only the nature of the letters in terms of the content, the philosophical content, which is of inestimable value. It's great value in any conceivable sense. But also, something very important is the method of transmission these letters had. That's something that's important to remember. Normally when we send letters to someone, to anyone, we use the mail, post office, essentially. Those days there was a post office in the 19th century in India, and then Sinek would put the letters, to anybody he would correspond with, and put it in the post office, and that would be the regular way. But in this particular case, remember, we were dealing with remarkable beings, which were, in a sense, quite removed from the idea of post office. So, for the letters to reach the master, they had to come through Madame Blavatsky. She was the bridge, so to speak, that would transmit the letters, would pass them on to the master. So, Mrs. Sinet would write to Madame Blavatsky, wherever she was. Mostly she was in Bombay. The society was in Bombay for about 2 years, and then they moved to Madras, the state of Madras, a place called Chennai right now. And but those days she was most of the time in Bombay. So Sinet would address a letter to Bombay, and then she would take the letter, put it in her pocket, and the letter would disappear from her pocket within about 5 minutes or so, after she would make some kind of sign, mental sign, to the master that there was correspondence for him. Now the letter would dematerialize in her pocket and materialize now in the presence of the master, wherever he was. If he was traveling, they would have some kind of he would have some kind of a traveling bag with him, and then the letter would materialize in his bag. If he was in his house in the Trans-Himalayan Tibet, he would receive the letter there. The letter would materialize there. So it was, a very fast kind of delivery in that sense, because it happened to mental beings. Most of the things that the master told us, most of the teachings that we receive in this thing, have to do with things that are difficult to believe. The dematerialization of some object materialized later on somewhere else, even sometimes thousands of miles of distance. For them, for the masters of their power, is everyday occurrence. There's nothing extraordinary about it for them. It's extraordinary for us. There's nothing miraculous about these things. It's simply a method. And a method that has to do with mental power. The power to somehow dematerialize something and rematerialize it somewhere else is something that can be done by a properly trained mind. These things are difficult for us to believe. But I'd like to refer you to, say, the year 1940. What would I have told my grandfather, who was very much into Catholicism? What would I have told him if he expressed a wish to attend a mass, say, by the Pope in Rome? I would have told him, Grandpa, you don't need to do that. Come to my apartment, I have a box with a screen, and then in that box, in that screen, we will be able to see the Pope saying the Mass. Full color, full sound, full everything. Now, my grandfather would have thought I was crazy. And if I tried to explain to him that this is something that is called television, and that the image and the sound are beamed through some kind of a satellite we have in space, my grandfather would have thought I was completely nuts, completely crazy. And would have, I would not believe anything that I was saying. But as we all know, television and satellite communication today is a natural occurrence to all of us, because we know the method. We discovered the laws that make it possible. So, mental telepathy, mental communication, or the mentality to disintegrate something and reintegrate it again, whatever we want to, are just questions of method, systems that we learn. In this particular case, the utilization of the mind. The mind is a very powerful instrument. We human beings at the present state of evolvement have only 10% of it. But the other 90% is hidden from us. Thank God, because one cannot tell what people would do. Unscrupulous people using the other 90% would be a disaster. So nature is very wise. It gives us only 10%, so as not to do, we will not do each other too much harm in that sense. So, but the thing is that all this power, all this other 90% of possibilities, is contained in all of us in a sort of seed manner. Now all we need to unfold it to wake it up. And that represents a method. That's what perfected human beings have done. Nature allows them that because they are in no position capable of doing anything that is damaging to anyone. They have abandoned selfishness completely. They only think of helping with expecting nothing in exchange. So therefore they have all these resources, very strange to us, very unbelievable to us. They have it at their disposal, which is practical because the letters will get there very fast, wherever they need to go. Now, the manner in which they are written is another thing that we have to take into account. It's a very important thing. Because the letters were not written, but precipitated. Now, what does it mean to precipitate a letter? Those who have visited the London Museum, where the originals of the letters are contained, in the library there, the British Museum, they have the originals of the letters. Now, when they are observed, if you go to the museum, you ask for the Mahatma papers, and they will bring you the letters. They are very well kept, put in plastic and so on, to avoid deterioration. And the thing that comes to mind, especially if you look at them with a magnifying lens, is that the trace of the line of the letters, of each letter, is not made of a continuous line, but rather small little lines with space in between them. At first hand it cannot be seen, but when you apply a magnifying lens on it, that can be observed, which is a typical case of precipitation, something not done with a pen or a pencil. The way it's done is the individual who's going to write the letter, precipitate the letter, fixes his attention, his mind, on the paper. And the letters start to take place, form in the paper. That's to precipitate a letter. Whether it's faster or whether it's better or not, I don't know. I think it's faster. I think so. But the remarkable thing is that most of the masters, did not write the letters, really. They would give the job. They're very, very, very busy people. So they would give the job to a chela of them, a disciple of them, who may have been way somewhere else. Sometimes hundreds of miles away or thousands of miles away. But it was a disciple. The master would make a sign mentally, and the disciple would hear the call, abandon what he was doing, and then prepare himself to write. Then the master would dictate the letter mentally, and the disciple would just copy, verbatim, word by word. The disciple would just copy, verbatim, letter by letter, and in the handwriting of the master. It was as if the master would take over the mind or the brain of the disciple and operate through it, because it's clear that his handwriting was typical. When Master Moria took over the correspondence for a while, when the Master KH was absent for about 3 months to receive the 6th major initiation, we are told, then of course he confided in his brother, Master Moria, with whom he has a very close personal relation, to take over the correspondence for that lapse of time. He said, please don't let my work be ruined by my absence, so please take over. I know you don't like to write, but if you can do this for me, we'll be very grateful. And the Master Moria said, what would have at that moment denied to my brother, who's the light of my soul? There's a very close relationship between both masters in this sense. And the Master Cage and the Master Moria, decided to continue with the correspondence for the time that Master Cage was going to be absent from it. Now, that's an interesting thing, because when you see the handwriting of the Master Moria is completely different from that of the Master KH. He used the same method. He would use a disciple to write the letters with, and that would be the way the letters would be written, essentially. As I said before, the way to corroborate this is to visit the library at the British Museum, where the letters are contained, and if they are observed carefully with a magnifying lens, we will confirm what I have just told you. Now, one thing that comes to mind is a question in a sense, why is it that the masters chose to respond to Mr. Sinet? As he himself was told, they don't get in touch with people which are not initiates, and that includes correspondence. To begin with, the Master KH had to ask for authorization from his boss, from his chief. Yes, the masters do have a chief, who is one grade upper than they are. And we call it the Mahashohan, which would be the great lord. That would be more or less the translation of the word. This is Tibetan. Maha is Sanskrit, but Shohan, it means lord in Tibetan. So, why would they, why would he consent to this correspondence, which was really breaking the rule a little bit, coming completely out of the usual way, the usual constraints that they have to operate under when it comes to communications of information to normal human beings, regular human beings. Okay. And the reason was that, to begin with, they felt that it was a useful source. They examined occultly Mr. Sinet carefully, and then reached a conclusion that he was very well intended, that he didn't want anything in exchange. It was very important. This is process of selfishness and all those lines, and that he was also a very respected editorial opinion in the Anglo-Indian community. So therefore, it was media, and it was one way of disseminating theosophical knowledge, theosophical information. So that was the reason why an exception was done along these lines. But it had to be Mr. Sinet, because of his characteristics as a personality, as a person. And then someone else who was a very high functionary in the British representation in India, Mr. Alan Octavian Hume. He was in a high position of the government of India, the colonial government in India, and he was also very philanthropic. He had this, generosity about him. He was a nice person, a gentleman, and he was intended on helping whenever he had a chance to. His position was that he was not so much a Briton, but he was mostly a citizen of the universe, a citizen of the world. Therefore, he even started the Congress in India. In other words, he gave India the beginning of its politics. That didn't sit very well with the crown in England, because he was supposed to represent them. And now here he was stimulating a process, a political process that eventually became the independence of India a century later, in the 20th century. But he was, as I said before, very philanthropic, and he felt that he had to do this for India. So this well predisposed Mahashohan to authorize also correspondence with him, Mr. Alan Octavian Hume. So correspondence became also with him. It went on only for a couple of years, because as a difference from Mr. Sinet, Mr. Hume had a great opinion of his own intellect. He was very intelligent, a very well illustrated man, and he had a great opinion of himself along those lines. He also had somewhat of a little bit of a prejudice against Asiatics, and the idea that the master, who was an Asiatic person, would deny an answer to his questions, all of them, didn't sit well with him. He didn't like this idea, and he protested about it. The master explained to him, as he explained to Mr. Sinet, that there were certain things, certain information he was not authorized to divulge. Therefore, he regretted it very much that he couldn't answer all the questions Mr. Hume put to him. But it wasn't because he didn't want to, but it was because he simply couldn't do it, and wouldn't do it. Apparently, Mr. Hume didn't accept this response, and his letters became a little bit aggressive, even a little bit insolent. And finally, the master told him, listen, if the tone of your correspondence doesn't go down a little bit, my master has asked me to discontinue the correspondence with you. So therefore, please, if you want to continue with us, try to understand what we need to do in order to work harmoniously. Amazingly, Mr. Hume didn't take the challenge, and he just the correspondence was discontinued with him, and he left the Theosophical Society. He was very disappointed along those lines because he was not given a response to some of his questions. It is a regrettable thing for him, and also for people who may have benefited because he was an influential opinion in India. People who have opinion from his own teachings as well. But he chose to leave the whole thing, and I think he lost a great chance. Because to have correspondence with a member of the planetary hierarchy is really an extraordinary thing to happen, and a very unusual thing. It must be said that the masters wrote letters also to several of the other initial theosophists. Those were small letters generally, and they were oriented generally to solve a personal problem that the individual would have. Or if the individual had been given a given work on behalf of Theosophy and he wasn't very clear about some problem that might have arisen, and he would write to the master would answer to him, giving him an answer and a solution to the problem. So there were a number of letters, shorter of them, most of them, written to some members of the Theosophical Society at its initiations, at its beginnings. Essentially, it can be found in two letters written by Mr. General Daza as Letters of the Masters of Wisdom, Volume 1 and 2. And these are available in esoteric libraries, in esoteric shops. So therefore, you can get them. If they're some of them are interesting and important, and some of them touch on philosophy and so on. But they were much shorter, and the correspondence didn't have the volume, the importance of the letters written to Mr. Sinet, who lasted, as I said before, about 4 years and a little bit more. Why did it end? It ended because there was disagreements between Mr. Sinet and the manner in which Mr. Alcott and Madame Blavatsky conducted business about the Theosophical Society. They were removed from British etiquette, and they would speak frankly and directly to people in their faces, and that didn't sit well with Mr. Sinet, who protested about that continually. So finally, their correspondence with him was discontinued as well. However, whatever had been delivered to that point after 4 years of correspondence was a remarkable amount of information which was completely unknown by the rest of the world, by anyone else, and coming directly from one of the members of the planetary hierarchy. Mr. Sinet built a wooden box to keep the letters, and when he disincarnated at the age of 81 in 1921, he bequeathed the letters to the person who was in charge of his will. It was a lady called Maud Hoffman. And in turn, she bequeathed them to the British Museum, to the library of the British Museum, which is what the originals are right now, as I stated before. This concludes the second segment of this mini seminar.